the question is, do we have recovered UFOs in our custody? The answer is yes. Am I convinced that Lou Elizondo, as the head of the ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project, came to know that to be true? Yes. And he has stated that now. He has stated it publicly. It doesn't have to really depend upon whether he told me or whether I told somebody else that he did. He has testified now openly to the House Oversight Committee that he knows that it's true that we have these UFOs, and he knows that to his own knowledge. In fact, I do not and have not represented Lou Elizondo in any of his commercial endeavors. I didn't represent him in connection with his book contract. I haven't represented him in connection with the video the big documentary that they've just done called The Age of Disclosure. I don't know what type of remuneration, if any, Lou has gotten from any of those activities. Yeah, I'm quite concerned about this. To the extent to which I believe that the Skywatcher people are engaged in artificially luring in some of the UFOs, that they've developed some kind of a technology that masks as a telepathic solicitation to come. Like a regular person or a group of people can reach out telepathically and solicit the UFO to come so they can have a direct contact experience with them. And that the Skywatcher people are mimicking that they've developed something they call the dog whistle that imitates telepathic solicitation, a good faith solicitation. And then I think they're engaged in the process of, and as I understand it, they're engaged in the process of trying to forcibly force down the UFO and take it into custody so that they can, again, get their hands on the technology. And very importantly, they're funded by private investors. And private investors are always trying to figure out how to take possession of something and get patents on it. Now, there are a number of things that Stephen has said that my own personal judgment is that we don't have adequate evidence to really support saying certain things like that publicly. It's not adequately substantiated. So that's all I can say. And he has not talked with me about having interviewed someone who has actually flown one of the alien reconstruction vehicles. No. This apparently is one of the arguments that they're making for keeping things secret, because they're afraid that if they reveal the fact that they have given some of this technology to some companies and not to other companies, that they're going to get sued over this, that it's an antitrust violation. They're not taking bids on these technologies, developing the back engineering the technologies. And so that they're arguing that, please don't expose this because we're going to get sued. Those are two different questions there. I think psychedelic consciousness is the easiest way to understand the science of it. Is there a veil to be pierced in which within 5 meters around it? These are interesting questions. The fact of the matter is a very major element of this particular subject, the UFOs and the extraterrestrial beings, relates very directly to consciousness. In the level of consciousness of our human family, the comparative level of consciousness that these ET beings may have, if they've had, several billion more years of evolution than we, to the extent to which we're assuming that we as a human species have evolved teleologically in a positive, progressive way from earlier levels of consciousness.
I think questions some people ask, what do you think about Bob Lazar?
Well, I haven't talked to Bob yet.
You will sit with Bob Lazar.
I'm in the process of trying to get a meeting to sit down. There's a mutual friend that we have that is in the process of arranging a sit down so we can get to talk to each other. But the things that the Bob Lazar has said in the past are all perfectly consistent with the more recently revealed information about the reality of Area 51, the existence of S4, the fact that there are craft, a real UFO alien craft at Area 51, actually at S4, and a lot of the details that Bob Lazar gave when he was interviewed earlier by George Knapp years ago and by Jeremy Cabell, the things that he was saying have really been borne out substantially already and continue to be borne out by the more people who come forward who have direct access to that information.
Hello, Danny. Thank you so much for joining us podcast. Such an honor to have you here today.
Terrific. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'd like to go at the beginning when you started in the UFO, and I think that's related to Dr. Jan Emack, 1994. Can you tell me the
Well,
beginning?
actually, it was earlier than that I really got involved earlier back in 1976 when President Jimmy Carter was elected in November of 1976. One of the very first things he did was contact the head of the CIA and demand to be briefed in on the UFO issue. He asked the head of the CIA to come all the way down to Plains, Georgia, to his home, even before President-elect Carter had come to Washington, and asked to be briefed on the UFO issue because President Carter had seen a UFO when he was the governor of Georgia. So as soon as he was elected on November 4th, he called the CIA to have him come brief him on November 19th of 1976. And the CIA director at that time was George H.W. Bush. And George H.W. Bush refused to brief him and said that he had no need to know that information. And so rather than take on the CIA and waste a lot of political capital fighting with them, what he did is President Carter contacted the chairman of the House Science and Technology Committee and asked him to have the Congressional Research Service set up a special investigation and research to find out what documents existed inside the United States government relating to the UFO phenomenon and potentially any extraterrestrial life form that might be responsible for them. The head of the Science and Technology Division of the U.S. Congressional Research Service contacted me, Dr. Marcia Smith, and asked if I would become general counsel or a special counsel to that investigation and research. Specifically, she wanted me to see if I could get a hold of the whatever the Vatican had, because I was legal counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their social ministry office at that time. And so she wanted to see if we could get the Vatican to provide to the president what information the Vatican had on the subject. And so that's how I became the special counsel to that particular research project and investigation. And it was in that context that I was given access to the classified portion of Project Blue Book, which was the United States Air Force secret investigation of the UFO phenomenon at the time. And it was there that I saw the photographs of an actual UFO crash retrieval. There wasn't any doubt about what it was. It was clear. And in fact, I actually traced into the back of a yellow pad the symbols that were on the UFO craft that made it perfectly clear that it was not any kind of a U.S. mock-up or Russian or anything else. It was something entirely alien.
Where this crash was, the crash, where exactly was the
It
retrieval?
wasn't clear. It was winter time, so it was clearly not Roswell, because Roswell happened in July of 1947. So this was a place that was covered with snow, and you could see where the UFO had crashed, and it had skidded across this field, and it plowed this great big dirt a trench, all the way, and then it stuck in the side of a big embankment. And it was stuck there, and you could see U.S. Air Force personnel all around it. taking photographs and actually a movie camera they had with them, taking moving pictures of it. And so I reported back to the Jesuit headquarters that in fact we had seen the photographs now of a UFO crash retrieval, and my superior at the Jesuit headquarters, Father William J. Davis, reached down into his dresser or his desk drawer and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 manila folder with a little clasp on it, handed it to me, and I opened it up, and it was a 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO in flight. And I asked him where he got it, and it turns out he'd gotten it from his sister, who had gotten it from her husband, who was the head of the air traffic controllers in Seattle, Washington. And one of his best friends, who was a cargo pilot, had taken the picture out of the window of his plane. And since he didn't want to get in trouble and lose his pilot license by reporting it, he brought it to his friend, who was the head of the air traffic controllers at the airport, and gave it to him. And Mike, her husband, didn't want to get in trouble. And so he brought it and gave it to his wife, Dodie, and said, "Here, bring this and give it to your brother. He's a priest." And so that's how I got that photograph of it. So the Jesuit headquarters, we then moved to meet with all 54 of the major religious offices in Washington, D.C., in the national offices, and tried to get them to set up a task force to try to come to grips with the religious implications of the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization and what the import was for our religious views. They declined to do it, but that got me involved in doing the investigation at the Jesuit headquarters. And because of that, I was eventually contacted by Dr. John Mack, who was the head of the Department of Clinical Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, because as it turns out, the United States military had a policy whereby if any ranking officer in any of the military services attempted to file an official UFO encounter report, the first thing that happened is they were ordered to go get a psychiatric exam. And it was clear, it's been revealed later, that this was a systematic program that had been established by the Defense Department in order to stop reports from going in about UFO encounters. And that's been now established that Richard Dolan, who is the publisher of the 2-volume work called UFOs in the National Security State, has secured, through the Freedom of Information Act, he's secured internal documents from the U.S. government showing that this was a formal program that they had to try to crush any kind of reporting. And so John Mack ended up having a number of these high-ranking officers referred to him for psychiatric exams, and he went through and gave them the psychiatric exam. But in the context of that, they explained to him why they were sent there. And so he after having a number of these, became really concerned and convinced that something was going on, really. And it wasn't, because these people were totally within the normal parameters of mental health, and yet they were all insisting upon filing these reports. And so what happened is he was put in touch with Bud Hopkins, who turned out to have been a friend of the family. And Bud Hopkins had begun interviewing all kinds of people who had had direct face-to-face encounters with landed UFOs. And so John interviewed a number of these people, and he decided he was going to file going to write and submit to the New England Journal of Medicine a major paper, a scholarly paper on this extraordinary phenomenon that was going on, of not only high-ranking military officials, but lawyers and doctors and school teachers and political elected officials who were reporting these kind of direct contacts with extraterrestrial beings, landing in like UFO craft. And so he submitted this to the New England Journal of Medicine, and they refused to publish it. And so he got upset about that and contacted a publisher, because he had won the Pulitzer Prize for he had written the major definitive psychobiography of T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. And so he was a Pulitzer Prize winning author. So he contacted the publishing house and said, "Here, I want to publish this paper," which he did. And as soon as he did, he was dragged up in front of a faculty committee at Harvard University and began to be excoriated for publishing a thing like that. That it was embarrassing to Harvard University because they maintained, the committee, that it was ridiculous to think that anything like that was true. And so he contacted me and asked me to represent him, to be his attorney before this council. And that's how I got the privilege of actually getting to interview almost all of the major leading figures in the field of UFO investigations in order to present them as witnesses at Harvard University in sort of a grand rounds at Harvard. And so that I got to meet Bud Hopkins, I got to meet Dr. Stanton Friedman, I got to meet, uh, Dr. Stephen Greer, I got to meet, all of the major people that were involved, and also got to interview a substantial number of the people who sincerely believed that they had had direct face-to-face encounters with extraterrestrial beings from these UFOs. And so that's how I ended up being contacted later by Dr. Stephen Greer to become legal counsel for the Disclosure Project, in which we brought 24 primarily U.S. government officials, directors of the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency, investigators, and others to testify in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club to the staff members of the House and Senate to brief them on this issue back in May of 2001. And so then I became legal counsel for the People's Public Hearings, where we had 40 witnesses testified in front of former senators and members of the House of Representatives. So I've been working at this thing now for 47 years. And more recently, I was contacted by Luis Elizondo, who was the head of the top secret program inside the Pentagon to be investigating UFOs. And I worked with him to prepare a complaint, which he filed with the United States Defense Department's Inspector General's office, complaining about the fact that the executive branch was lying to Congress in falsely asserting that there was no evidence of any kind that UFOs were real, asserting that there was no indication of any kind of extraterrestrial intelligence that was involved with them at all, and just flat perjuring themselves to Congress. And he was upset about this and filed the complaint. And so we went and met with the Inspector General of the United States Defense Department and began to lay out the evidence showing that this was a real phenomenon. And they were flabbergasted because they too had been lied to. And so they began to call in more and more government officials and military officials to come in and get briefed on this. And that's how it started. And it started coming unwound because Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, and who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, and all of these people started coming forward in providing information to the Senate Intelligence Committee about this under oath. And so this whole thing is now started to come unwound. And they've testified now in front of the House of Representatives in the House Oversight Committee. And the House Oversight Committee has now set up a special task force to seek the declassification of all of the U.S. government documents that date all the way back to 1945 about the UFO phenomenon. And that's what's going on right now. There's another hearing that's scheduled for the week of May 12th on the UFO issue that I'm going to be there, that I'm sure Lou Elizondo is going to be there and others. So that this thing is unwinding. In the United States Senate has passed a 64-page act ordering all 6 of our United States military services all 18 of our United States intelligence agencies, all 32 of our United States Defense Department agencies, and all of the private aerospace corporations who have been put into possession of any of this UFO material, because they're asserting now that there's an ultra secret program going on trying to not only back engineer any UFOs that have crashed, but that there's a program going on now apparently attempting to lure in and shoot down UFO vehicles, so they can capture the vehicles, so they can reverse engineer them to make weapons, a new weapon delivery system for the United States. And this is a terrible idea. I mean, to be firing upon UFOs from an extraterrestrial civilization that clearly have vastly superior technology to ours. And, to say nothing about how completely offensive it is, of all of the rules of international relations, to be engaged in that kind of activity and lying to Congress about it. And there are statutes that prohibit that activity, kind of military activity, without the authority of Congress. So that's where we are right now.
I want to ask you your personal belief about the UFO. What do you believe personally? Like, what do you believe the UFO all about?
Well, I think that as a lawyer, what I've done is I've applied Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure that require any attorney involved in presenting this evidence to any kind of court or tribunal has to obtain evidence on the basis of which they can come to conclusions that it's real and it's truthful. And the bottom line is that I've become convinced, number one, very importantly, starting at the top, that not only there is life elsewhere in our galaxy, but that in fact that life has become intelligent and highly technologically developed, and in fact is developed superluminal travel, that it can transport a vehicle from their star system to our star system, and they have been doing that. That they're actually coming and going from our planet, and there appear to be at least 4 different species of extraterrestrial, highly intelligent, highly technologically developed life forms that are non-human, and that they've been coming and going here for at least since 1945. There's strong evidence that one of the first craft may have been recovered as early as 1933, but at least as of 1945, in June of 1945, one of these craft landed near the Trinity site, where the United States was getting set to test the first nuclear bomb. Okay, and that very clearly appears to have attracted the attention of these UFO species, and that since the detonation of that bomb in July of 1945, and then the dropping of the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, these UFOs have been seen all around various nuclear facilities. First at the 509th Bombing Group, which was in Roswell, New Mexico. That was the only base on the planet where there were nuclear bombs. And that's where one of these craft crashed in July of 1947. And we clearly recovered that craft. In fact, Colonel Philip Corso, who was the head of research and development of foreign technology at our United States Pentagon, has openly, publicly stated that he was given some of the advanced technology out of that crash at Roswell. In his, and he's later written a book, and also left a black and white home movie for his grandchildren to be shown to them after he passed away, detailing how he had actually encountered a UFO craft. It landed near the Trinity site back in June of 1945. and actually encountered the UFO extraterrestrial being that came out of the craft and communicated with him telepathically. So so I believe all of those things actually have happened, and I believe that the United States government, since at least July of 1947, has been fully aware of the fact that an extraterrestrial civilization exists, a non-human extraterrestrial civilization exists. That in fact they've achieved interstellar space travel, and that they're here on our planet, and they've known it, and they've been lying to Congress about it. And the United States military and the intelligence community has determined that they're going to keep this secret so that they can reverse engineer the technology of the recovered UFO craft, and make a weapons system out of it. And therefore, they've been lying to Congress. They've been lying to all the news media. They've been committing perjury. And in fact, they've been mounting a major self-conscious campaign to suppress anybody who attempts to testify about this. And anybody who attempts to report it publicly, they attack them, they threaten them, they try to destroy their reputation by contacting their families and their employers to tell them that they think that they're mentally ill, and that Richard Dolan has proven that now in the documents that he's extracted under the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm convinced that that program was in fact going on. That program is still in fact going on. That they're attempting to suppress this information, and so we have now succeeded in getting a statute passed. It's not adequate yet, but offering special protection for UFO whistleblowers. So more and more of them are coming forward now, and going specifically to the Senate Intelligence Committee and providing the information to them. We've gotten Congress to set up an office called the All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office. But the problem is that they are not really doing anything about it. People come in out of the military services and intelligence community and report very specific, credible information to them, and they're not doing anything to follow up on it. And so that the whistleblowers have started to not go there because it's a waste of their time, and they're concerned that they're just being reported and made public. And so that they've decided to go more especially now to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And so there are now approximately 40 first-hand, well, many of them are first-hand witnesses who have seen the UFO craft, who have been in the presence of the UFO craft, who've actually put their hand on the UFO craft, and Jay Stratton, who was the head of the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program in the Pentagon, has stated now publicly that he has actually observed one of the non-human ET beings that was one of the occupants of one of the UFOs.
There's evidence for that?
Oh yes, well that's his first person testimony. I mean, that's direct admissible evidence in any court of law. And there are photographs, close-up photographs of the UFO craft that are in the possession of the United States government, and there are records. I'm convinced that there are records of telepathic interviews of UFO beings that have been in the craft and have voluntarily shared information with our United States government. But the United States government has been concealing this inside their military intelligence offices and civilian intelligence agencies, while we try to seek comparative advantage over other countries in the world by developing a delivery system primarily for nuclear weapons. A delivery system that can launch one of these vehicles from the United States and deliver a nuclear payload into the heart of Russia or China within 2 minutes. And that is dangerous, It destabilizes all of the geopolitical agreements that have been reached to prevent first strike nuclear attacks. And this is an extraordinarily dangerous situation because I also believe now that these forces are engaged in actually mounting military assaults against UFOs, military assaults to try to shoot them down and to take them into physical custody so they can get more access to the technological information that the crafts carry. And that's an illegal war that's going on without congressional authorization, and virtually always without the authority of the president.
And where did you get this information that there's already happening this illegal war?
From talking to the people who are directly involved in the program.
And just so quickly, I just want to understand, when you look to what is happening, do you think there's um, the technology? I want to speak about the technological advances that you speaking about. Can you tell me what exactly about this technology about and where it's really implemented in in the government?
Well, well, a lot of it is so extraordinarily advanced.
Like in what exactly? Like if you tell me like the aerospace companies, do you think they really hold something from this technology? Do you think it's really implemented in some of our, yeah, like military bases or whatever? What exactly this pieces of technology looks like, if you have an idea?
Well, I think that what they've done is they've reproduced what they call reproduction vehicles. That they've learned some of the stuff about the technology of the propulsion, the anti-gravity capacities of the UFO craft, the superluminal flight capabilities. I mean, faster than light travel. Uh, uh, I think that they've jury rigged some of this technology uh, so that they have actual reproduction vehicles, that they have what they call RVs. They're reproductions of UFO vehicles, and that they are able to fly these and pretend that they're UFO people. And so that some of that is, I believe that capacity exists now. And so therefore, I believe that I don't go so far as Dr. Stephen Greer goes in believing that what they're doing is they're trying to assemble a fleet of these UFOs so they can stage a false flag attack, and pretend that we're being attacked by UFOs from an extraterrestrial civilization in order to get massive military funding for their programs. Uh, I don't believe it's gone that far. I do, and I don't believe, I don't believe that there's an extremely highly developed off-world utilization of these craft yet. I don't believe that we've taken them to the moon. I don't believe that we've flown them to Mars. I certainly don't believe that we've flown any of these craft outside of our solar system. I don't believe any of the stuff that Corey Goode or Wilcock or any of those people are talking about, that there's some sort of interstellar space travel that we are already secretly engaged in conducting. I don't believe any of that. But I do believe that there is an infant uh, industry now in trying to reproduce these vehicles and try to get some military advantage to the United States, which I think is completely inappropriate. I think that we need to, all the citizens of the world need to mobilize and focus attention on the United States government and get the Congress of the United States to subpoena these people and bring them in and make them testify about what it is they're doing and make them stop doing this and reach out to the other nations of the world and establish treaties pursuant to which we all agree not to try to use any of the technology for any kind of a weapon system. I think that that's absolutely essential, and that we enter into a treaty agreement that none of the countries are going to allow the deployment of any kind of military force against the UFOs right now. The UFOs have not undertaken any kind of aggressive actions toward us. this attempting to use military force against, an unknown civilization like this is not only foolhardy, but it's incredibly unethical and completely contrary to the laws of international relations.
Can I ask you, because when you speak about the UFO as like this coming from extraterrestrial um, places or from the planet of Earth, and if so, do you have an idea, or someone told you who they are exactly?
Well, the closest that I've come that I received a phone call from a man who was dying, who was a member of Project Blue Book, and he was a clerk typist. His name is what was it? I'll think of his name in a second. But anyway, he was Wolf. His name was Oscar Wolf. His name was, and he contacted me on his deathbed from northern Minnesota, had me fly out to meet with him, with all the tubes and everything in him, because he was just on his last days. And he confided to me that he had actually gone with the commander of Project Blue Book Special Section that was investigating the over 700 sightings that they found it completely impossible to explain away, and that he had gone to S4, which is a facility, an underground facility, some 11 miles away from Area 51, and had actually seen a live ET person who was there, and that his commanding officer was actually communicating with the being face to face, telepathically,
And how this being looked like?
well, he was not a 3.5 foot guy. He was like 5.5 feet tall, almost 6 feet tall. They had him all dressed in a little blue jumpsuit, uh, like clothes, and he was telepath. He has a big, huge, kind of large head with the big dark eyes that come around in the almond shape around on the side, little holes for a nose and little holes for ears, you know. But he was completely friendly. He was cooperative in engaging in communication, telepathic communication with the commander, and Oscar Wolf watched all this happening, and he was shown a set of index cards that had notes on them from telepathic interviews that had been conducted with the ET being. And one of the questions was, "Where are you from? What are you doing here?" And he said that he was part of a task force that was put together from beings from different star systems inside our galaxy, and that they were tasked with going around to the different planets where life had actually begun, to monitor what stage the life forms were in. And he was asked the follow-up question of, well, who is it you were doing this for? I mean, who tasked you to do this? And he said, well, you people would refer to it as God, but it's very different than you think.
So what it is, if it's different from God? What exactly are you referring to?
He didn't say. He didn't say what the card said or whether they talked about it or explained exactly what it was. That I mean, I was so kind of thunderstruck by the fact that he had seen one of the ETs, and was there in the facility at S4 where the being was, that the being was being cooperative and sharing information, and that they were taking the information down on official cards. So, that these are records that exist inside our government, that can be secured, and be presented to the Congress so that the Congress can know that this is going on, and take the required steps to stop them from shooting down or taking military action against the UFOs, and also stop the weapons development program so that they can reach out and establish treaties with other countries around the world so that we will all mutually refrain from trying to back engineer the technology into weapon systems. I mean, that's all of those steps are absolutely essential. And those are things that I firmly believe that what I've said so far is true. Now, there's some other things that I've gotten reports about that I'm not certain yet. But for example, one of the technologies that they may have is a form of teleportation, that they may be actually able to teleport from one place to another. For example, they could be on their planet by their star system in our galaxy, and then just appear like the double slit experiment, be in like more than one place, and then direct their intention, their consciousness, and their attention to the one of the spots, and all of a sudden they would materialize there. They would dematerialize from one spot and materialize in another spot. And that's what causes them to look like they're coming from some other dimension. All of a sudden, they just sort of materialize. And we have reports, the most recent reports now, from Matthew Brown. Matthew Brown was a very high-level State Department person, and it worked for, it appears, the Defense Intelligence Agency. And he recounts now, just in the last few days, when we're hoping he's going to be one of the witnesses in the May 12th testimony before Congress, we hope. And he testifies about photographs, videotapes, I think. You have videotapes that were taken with an underwater surveillance system that the United States had deployed. They were tracking a group of Russian vessels, seagoing vessels that were intelligence vessels, who were staked out at this location in the Pacific Ocean off Kimchi. And they had them under observation. And all of a sudden, a football field-sized triangular black craft just slowly materialized right above that ship, or that gathering of ships, which caused the intelligence report to suggest that the Russians somehow had foreknowledge that this craft was going to uncloak, was going to kind of materialize at that very particular place. And he's provided that information now to the House Oversight Committee. He's provided the information under oath to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and still the Senate Intelligence Committee is sitting on all this information. And the Senate Intelligence Committee hasn't held any public hearings about it. Yeah, but what they have done is they've prepared and passed a 64-page bill, basically declaring that they now have convincing evidence that our executive branch, intelligence agencies, and military are in possession of knowledge about the reality of the UFO phenomenon, and that they're hiding it from Congress. And they passed the 64-page bill. It was co-sponsored by Senator Schumer, who was the majority leader of the United States Senate, and Mike Rounds, a very conservative Republican senator from South Dakota. It's been endorsed also by Marco Rubio, who's now not only the Secretary of State of the United States, but he's also the National Security Advisor for President Trump. And they now know that this is true. So the steps need to be taken to get this information evaluated. And so there's, in the 64-page bill, what they're proposing is that a 9-person review board be established by the president to review every single document, every single piece of equipment, every single piece of information, telephone call, internal memos about the UFO phenomenon since January 1st of 1945, be gathered and provided to this board of review, and that the board of review publicly release every single piece of information that is 25 years old or more, which goes all the way back to Roswell to 1947. It goes all the way back to the sightings at Trinity in 1945, to provide this information to a classified portion of the National Archives, so that members of Congress who have the adequate security clearances can in fact can review this, and then the American public will be notified that the UFOs are real, that they come from an extraterrestrial civilization, that the extraterrestrial civilization is in communication with us, and the American people and the rest of the people of the world, we have to start now shifting our consciousness into understanding this, and try to reevaluate our place in the universe, reevaluate ourselves, our species in the chain of life, you know, to figure out what we're going to do about this. What changes are we going to bring about in our geopolitical relations between the countries here on our planet? What kind of economic impact this is going to have? What kind of impact is this going to have technologically? And very importantly, what kind of impact is this going to have on us psychologically? And socially, psychologically. We have to figure out how to responsibly respond to this, rather than be faced with just lies insisting that it's not true anymore, and allow just that group of people in the military and intelligence community. It's like there's an old Sufi saying that, when the pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets, and see, that's what's happening right now. The military and the intelligence community are confining all of this information just to themselves, and they're responding to it militarily, by trying to make weapons out of the technology and firing upon these craft. That this is ridiculous for, a democratic culture to allow some tiny group of individuals who have been raised in with a military mindset to monopolize this information, and to actually take action based upon it and violate virtually every single principle and premise of our Constitution by refusing to even tell certain presidents about this, who's their boss, and to refuse to tell various secretaries of defense about it, and it refused to tell certain heads of the CIA even about it. And there's Admiral Wilson, who was the chief of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the United States military, tried to get information, and he was threatened, if he didn't stop asking the questions, that he'd get busted out of the military. This is unacceptable.
We have some question. I would like to ask you more, but I think we have question from Reddit community from UFO, and maybe I can share this with you. Yeah. So the first question that I think was upvoted about from the Reddit community, they ask from Lazy Constant, ask him the most obvious question everyone should be asking you. Dr. Stephen Greer claimed that Daniel yourself stated that Louis Elizondo saw a recovered UAV in a facility. So ask him if the case, what Louis told him the other craft or what exactly all about. Yeah.
Well, that's actually about three or four steps away from the substance of it. The question is, do we have recovered UFOs in our custody? The answer is yes. Am I convinced that Lou Elizondo, as the head of the ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project, came to know that to be true? Yes. And he has stated that now. He has stated it publicly. It doesn't have to really depend upon whether he told me or whether I told somebody else that he did. He has testified now openly to the House Oversight Committee that he knows that it's true that we have these UFOs, and he knows that to his own knowledge. Now, when he was asked by Congressman Burleson from Arkansas, who was on the panel of the House Oversight Committee, could Lou Elizondo provide to him in a secured facility? Could Lou Elizondo provide to the Congress the absolute definitive proof that we were in possession of such a UFO and the bodies that have been recovered that were proven to be non-human? Could he provide that information to Congress? And Lou Elizondo testified under oath that that is beyond his pay grade. He is not authorized to provide that evidence to them, but he's telling them that it's true. But he isn't authorized to show them the proof. That would have to be somebody who is higher than he is in rank in the government, and the question is, like, who is that? Who is it they have to subpoena to get to come in to provide that evidence for them? And that's what the Congress of the United States is working on right now, vastly too slowly, in my judgment. And that's why we have the New Paradigm Institute that has been set up now to mobilize the citizens of the United States who have the unique ability to put pressure on the elected representatives by threatening to put them out of office if they don't do their job, to replace them with people who will do the job, of exercising their constitutional responsibility to assert oversight over the activities of the intelligence community and the military to stop them from doing what they're doing, and so that's what the New Paradigm Institute is all about. And that's why we've set it up so that people can just contact us at newparadigminstitute.org and get fully briefed on all of this stuff. They can get the answers to all these different questions that we've been able to ascertain the answer to so far. But in specific response to his question, that Lou Elizondo has stated publicly that, to his knowledge, we have these cracked.
There's another question from 1DMG. He said that I would love from you to answer the question on if he think in a field filled with bad actors looking to make a quick I think criticism.
Let me read the question, see if I can figure out what he's asking here. Back that up a little bit. I would love for him to answer the question of if he thinks, that's me, in a field filled with bad actors, blah, 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 who've been blah, 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 his offer of uncredited diplomas in ufology. Oh, it's good. No, this is that's a whole lot of, that's the Ubiquity University. Ubiquity University. We had associated with them at one time, trying to help get people information about the UFOs, stuff like that. That university has now offered to establish a diploma program, but the diplomas are recognized only in Europe. They're not recognized here in the United States. So that the bottom line is that's a complete separate operation now. We're what we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute is providing information, which would amount to a PhD, but we're not offering any accredited courses, but we're offering courses where people can learn all about this. They can get a full scale education, and it provides all the evidence, all the footnotes, all of the direct testimony that's provided by Congress. We've collated all of that and make it available, and it's all free. All people need to do is go on the internet to newparadigminstitute.org, and very importantly, they can sign up to become members of Citizens for Disclosure. Citizens for Disclosure is a citizen movement now that we're going to have representatives in all 435 of the congressional districts in the country, and in every one of the 50 states. We're going to have offices of people that are set up to facilitate holding local meetings, writing letters to their own Congress people, going to the local newspapers and giving them letters to the editor, going on cable television shows, etc. This is what we're doing. We're trying to generate a massive grassroots movement among the citizenry to put pressure on the members of Congress to do their constitutional duty to get control over this program that's going on right now. And if the elected representatives that are in there now don't do it, taking steps to replace them with those who will do that. I mean, this is our obligation as citizens. We only represent 4.5% of all the people on the planet, but we're in a unique, exclusive position to be able to really do the most about it by actually putting people in office who are going to fulfill their constitutional responsibility to get this program under control and stop them from doing what they're doing. stop them from weaponizing this technology, stop them from shooting down the UFOs, stop them from capturing and even killing the ET people that are in these craft. We have to do that now.
But the question is, why didn't appear too often? I think I asked this question to Jack Valley, and it's not too common to see the UFO, or why the case? Do you have any idea why they don't appear like to anyone?
Yeah, I do. I do have. It's it's not clear exactly what their plan is. Why there are literally hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who have seen UFOs. Okay, and there are literally thousands of people who have had direct face-to-face encounters with the non-human occupants of these craft. And they've been trying to tell people for decades about this. The problem is that people are succumbing to this covert operation that's going on the part of the United States intelligence agencies and military to still attack people who are talking about this. They keep trying to give people the impression that anybody who believes in UFOs is mentally ill. This has really been very effective, and is still effective. People are still very self-conscious about admitting that they know about UFOs. And they're very, very reluctant. Tens of thousands of people have been so reluctant that they won't even tell anybody that they had a direct encounter with the UFO. But that's getting much better now. As we've come forward, the New Paradigm Institute has been organizing, has been assisting in getting witnesses to Congress, to getting information shared with Congress. We've gone around and met in detail with the staff members at the House of Representatives and in the Senate, have been providing them direct information that they can give to their representatives, and we've been organizing the citizens. So we believe that it's going to put maximum pressure on our side of the U.S. government. And the question is to what we can do to get the UFO people to be more transparent. There are what they call CE5 sessions, where people go out and stand in a field or sit in a field even at nighttime and reach out telepathically to try to get a craft to come in. Now it's getting much more difficult because the United States military and the others are shooting them down, are trying to lure them in, pretending that they're innocent citizen groups, trying to get them to come forward, and then attacking them,
Quick question, Danny. Do you think this ET can be also evil? Because you mentioned it's all innocent or maybe good ET being, but do you think they could be evil also?
Well, I would say this, that there's Marshall Summers is a person, he and his son and family have been writing about this for decades. And what they're saying is, look, that you have to start out with a basic assumption that they could be potentially more or less like us. There are good people and there are not good people. But if they've been given the access to the special technology that their planet has developed to enable them to come all the way here to our planet, that there's one piece of evidence that I've seen that people think that they were attacked by UFOs. And that is this tiny island out in the Pacific back years ago. And really what it was is it turns out that they were having rays of light that hit them, and it appears that they were taking samples from them forcibly. Now that's unethical in our opinion, and it's certainly unethical and unacceptable to us to allow women to be kidnapped and have any of their egg cells taken from them involuntarily, and then have them gene spliced with the genetic material of the UFO beings, and then reimplanted in the womb of a human woman, and allow the child to gestate, for the full first trimester.
Is this true? Is this true? Happened already?
Oh yes, no, that is true. That is true. That I'm convinced that has been going on, and that is unacceptable. Now, you can call it evil, but as people hasten to point out, this is something that we do with apes and in chimpanzees, and we do it with other kinds of animals. And if in fact this civilization could be as much as 6 or 7 billion years advanced from us, I mean, that they could, to some extent, view us as fairly primitive life forms. And so that therefore, in their ethical system, that they may be operating with no more malice than we act toward gorillas or chimpanzees. And we are constantly engaging and interfering in their reproductive systems and genetically experimenting with them. I don't condone either one of those things. I mean, I think we really have to be more reflective about what it is we've been doing to other life forms on our planet. But I think we have to be careful about being over self-righteous about applying our own standards that we don't even abide by, you know? But all of that having been said, my position and the position of the New Paradigm Institute is that we are going to try to do everything that we can do in any attempts to communicate with the extraterrestrial beings to get them to stop doing that. They shouldn't be doing that, and that we're going to take steps to the degree to which we can to get them to stop doing that. Have them explain to us what it is they're doing, and to understand that. But as far as whether they're good or evil, that a lot of that has to do with the particular standards that you're applying to determine what's good or evil. That's why I'm willing to point out particular things that they have done that I'm convinced that they have done, which I believe to be wrong. And I believe that they need to be stopped from doing it, not forcibly, not to, engage in military action against them, but to get them to stop doing that. Okay. And that one of them is the shooting beams at people and taking pieces of tissue from them for experimentation, and even kidnapping people against their will, that I believe those things are wrong, and that I intend to tell them so as soon as we can get a chance to talk to them, you know. But they clearly are talking to some people, and there's dozens and dozens of witnesses that have borne witness to the fact that we have United States military officials and civilian officials in the intelligence community who are in communication with one or more of these extraterrestrial species, and that they're just lying about it. So we need to get that information. We need to get the bill. The bill is going to be repassed by the United States Senate this year, like in July, mid-July. United States Senate is going to repass the 64-page bill. It's called the Schumer-Rounds bill that demands the setting up of this board to review all the information. And it's going to be demanding that all the information be turned over to them. Now, we've succeeded in getting 23 pages of this past the House already. So they've already issued the order they haven't issued them to the private aerospace corporations, but they've issued the orders to the 6 military services and the 18 intelligence agencies and to the 32 United States Defense Department agencies, ordering them to gather together all of the information that they have and to prepare it for being turned over to the National Archives. We have achieved that, okay? And that they're ordered to have accomplished that by September of this year, which is really an important hallmark to keep in mind, because that benchmark is where they're supposed to have gathered all that information together by September of this year, okay, and be prepared to turn it over to the National Archives. The Senate bill had mandated that they turn it over immediately. The House bill hasn't done that yet. They've just said you have to have it all gathered together and be prepared to turn it over. That's just that nitpicky stuff that they're engaged in, because the former head of the House Intelligence Committee, Michael Turner, comes from the 10th Congressional District in Ohio, which is where the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is. And that's where they've got one or more of these craft that they've been reverse engineering. So he was directly under the sway of those private aerospace corporations that are doing that out at their air base, and he's now been tossed off as the head of as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and a new person, Dan Crenshaw, from Texas, the second district in Texas, and so we want people from the second district of congressional district of Texas, down by the outskirts of Houston, Texas, to contact Dan Crenshaw and to tell him that they want him to approve the bill that's getting passed by the Senate, the whole 64 pages of the bill, to set up this task force, this board of review, to review all of the documentation and turn over to the American public and to the world as much of it as they can that does not, in fact, violate any legitimate security concern, and which I think is going to be 95% of it at least. Needs to be revealed. And then we need to look intensely at whatever the 5% is that they're withholding, and it has to meet very important standards and to be reviewed again and again to release that as soon as we possibly can. That's what our New Paradigm Institute supports, the passage of that bill.
I think there's also a question about can you ask him if he can substantiate I think of Greer claims about knowing and talking to a human who has flown from ARV.
Stephen Greer's claims about knowing and talking to a human. Well, I can't. I don't know. I have not talked with Stephen about that.
Okay, and another question, ask him about his thoughts on Greer in JC Michael podcast and his recent comment.
Got a lot of Stephen Greer fans here. I can tell. And again, I point out that I was legal counsel to Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project for 20 years. Okay, and so and I get along famously with Stephen Greer, and I believe that a overwhelming majority of things that Stephen Greer has said are true. Now, there are a number of things that Stephen has said that my own personal judgment is that we don't have adequate evidence to really support saying certain things like that publicly. It's not adequately substantiated. So that's all I can say. And he has not talked with me about having interviewed someone who has actually flown one of the alien reconstruction vehicles. So I just don't know that. But I'm sure there are people who have, and I'm sure that they're flying them around. That's a very important thing. And I wasn't certain of that back when I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project, and had held in reserve, taking a position on that. Since then, I now am convinced that we have, in fact, undertaken the reconstruction of some of the technology, and that the United States military has a super secret program pursuant to which they're actually flying some of these reconstructed vehicles. I'm not sure that they've been able to fly any of the original vehicles themselves, because one of the pieces that I'm convinced is true is that those UFO vehicles are piloted telepathically, and I'm not sure that the pilots that we have in the Air Force, and Navy are adequately trained to do that. I don't think that they have the capacity to do that, and that's why there's been a program, I'm sure exists, of attempting to recruit people who have developed psychic abilities, who they want to help fly the actual vehicles of the UFO people.
Another question, Another question, I don't need to see that, but do you feel, or yourself, do you feel the Skywatcher program is behaving ethically regarding the method they use? Another interview, you mentioned something to the effect that they were doing what they're doing, and didn't seem like high consciousness activity to.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned about this. To the extent to which I believe that the Skywatcher people are engaged in artificially luring in some of the UFOs, that they've developed some kind of a technology that masks as a telepathic solicitation to come. Like a regular person or a group of people can reach out telepathically and solicit a UFO to come so they can have a direct contact experience with them. And that the Skywatcher people are mimicking that they've developed something they call the dog whistle that imitates a telepathic solicitation, a good faith solicitation. And then I think they're engaged in the process of, and as I understand it, they're engaged in the process of trying to forcibly force down the UFO and take it into custody so that they can, again, get their hands on the technology. And very importantly, they're funded by private investors. And private investors are always trying to figure out how to take possession of something and get patents on it. And I think that is totally unethical. And I don't think it's a legitimate undertaking. Now, if in fact the Skywatcher group is willing to have open source information about everything, to tell everybody what it is they have found, but they cannot. They should not engage in duplicitous activity toward the UFOs by pretending to be a good faith group that's soliciting their good faith contacts so that they can have citizen diplomatic communications with them, and then, arrest them basically, force down their craft and arrest them and take them into custody or anything like that. That we've got to be extremely careful at this early stage of our interaction with the UFO people, that this is going to affect our relationship with them for the next 10,000 years. So we can't allow people to be careless and reckless like this, in deceiving them and using forcible means against them, kidnapping them, taking them into custody involuntarily and interrogating them. We've got to get that stopped right now, and that's what the New Paradigm Institute is for. Is the mobilization of the citizens ourselves to reach out and compel our Congress to act and to exercise its constitutional authority to take control over this and to have it subject to public scrutiny, not to have it being done in secret, not to have it being done for military purposes or for intelligence gathering to try to establish superiority over other people on our planet. That's just
Okay.
unethical.
Yeah. Maybe a bit of criticism. I'm not sure you are open to a bit of criticism or not.
Pardon?
Criticism, a bit of criticism. Are you open to that from the audience?
Am I open
A
to
bit of
criticism?
criticism. Yeah.
Oh, I'm used to criticism. Anybody who takes any kind of affirmative position on things that are somewhat controversial has to assume that someone is going to try to contradict you or to do something like that. I'm getting much better at it than I used to be.
There was a lot, but there was also criticism. So I think one of the things about they ask about hidden commercial interest. You represent a figure like Luis Elizondo, whose media engagement and media engagement and commercial endeavor have been lucrative. Have you or your firm ever taken compensation that ties to you financially to the UFO disclosure industry?
No.
And if so, why you haven't been more transparent about this interest?
No, never.
Yeah.
No, we're a 501c3 public interest organization. People make contributions to us and get a tax deduction, just like they do to the American Civil Liberties Union or the NAACP or B'nai B'rith or any of the others. That our people are salaried, and they're salaried in accordance with a specific provision. There's a California law that sets limits on salaries and stuff for people predicated upon their educational background and professional experience. And we go strictly by those requirements. And nobody is engaging in personal inurement in any way. We're quite adamant about that, in fact. And in fact, I do not and have not represented Lou Elizondo in any of his commercial endeavors. I didn't represent him in connection with his book contract. I haven't represented him in connection with the video the big documentary that they've just done called The Age of Disclosure. I don't know what type of remuneration, if any, Lou has gotten from any of those activities, but it certainly has not redounded to the New Paradigm Institute in any way whatsoever. All of our books are completely transparent and open to everyone. We've gotten A+ audits from independent auditing firms for the last dozen years. We've been
Mhm.
extraordinarily careful about that.
Okay. And also another point, the fitting failure. You had defended witnesses who later exposed as fabricators. What formal vetting process do you use to clarify the credibility of whistleblower before publicly supporting their claims?
I don't know who they're talking about. They're saying we defended the defended witnesses. I don't know who they're talking about. So I don't know how to respond to that.
Okay. And also accountability to public misinformation. There's someone saying that if it were proven to some of these whistleblower claims who championed were inaccurate or deceptive, what would you take public responsibility for amplifying them? Or do you believe that the greater cause justify prompting and verify the claims?
Certainly not. No, that's transparently not true. No. If the fact is that there are very few people that we have taken positions of saying we endorse what they're saying. That you can review the entire records of the New Paradigm Institute, and for that matter, the Romero Institute, which is the housing 501(c)(3, and the Christic Institute, all the way back to 1980. I mean the litigations, all the litigations that we've conducted have been demonstrated to have verified what it is we've been saying happens. That we exposed the people that killed Karen Silkwood. We exposed the fact that she was murdered on the way to delivering documents to the New York Times. We know what the content of the documents were. We won the $10.5 million judgment, on behalf of her for her children. We did the 3 Mile Island case. We're the ones that established the fact that there was an actual partial meltdown of the core. The witnesses that we got that verified that have all been vetted and verified, and to the point where the Nuclear Regulatory Agency admitted that it was a meltdown. They were already prepared to pump all the radioactive effluents in the damaged 3 Mile Island nuclear facility out into the Susquehanna River until we stopped them from doing it. Okay, so that we stand on our record. And with regard to the second part of the question, if there were anyone that we amplified or gave responsibility in saying that they were telling the truth, if it were discovered that they were not telling the truth, we would say so. Yeah, I mean that you've got to do that, like in any kind of a trial. If you have a witness who has said things that are false in the past, you got to come to grips with that immediately. And if they have any credibility, you got to separate out things that they may have said that weren't true from things that are true. You know, and that's our job. That we have responsibility for vetting that. In fact, that's one of the things that we've been doing. We're going through I taught a class on kind of the historical facts about the UFO phenomenon. We're going through that again just this week, scrubbing through that to see if there's anything in there that later information has come out indicated wasn't entirely true. So we're engaged in that process all the time.
I think the last piece here, willingness to submit independent audit. Would you agree today to submit all of your UFO related claims, client relationship, and financial interest to an independent review by third party of scientists or lawyers? It's a bit, yeah. And
I don't know where these people are coming from. But I mean, we have an audit. We have an audit every year. The audit is completely public. That's publicly available. That's what 501(c)(3s are all about. Yeah.
okay, another question. Let's move on the point. This question should have been asked to Grush or Leo Alzando. If these programs exist and continue to exist, what happened the day after disclosure for military? I would think that they would be the first to the field this technology, and it will most likely cause some disturbance with the branches if they feel these capabilities were denied to them. Boeing just signed a $20 billion contract to build the F-47 sixth generation fighter. Meanwhile, secret programs could be fielding the seventh generation tech. I think that's an interesting question. Yeah.
Sure. No. This apparently is one of the arguments that they're making for keeping things secret, because they're afraid that if they reveal the fact that they have given some of this technology to some companies and not to other companies, that they're going to get sued over this, that it's an antitrust violation. They're not taking bids on these technologies, developing the tech, back engineering the technologies. And so they're arguing that, please don't expose this because we're going to get sued. My position is you should have thought of that, beforehand, before doing that stuff. And, that we're going to let the chips fall where they may. If people have taken the financial risk of seeking advantage over their competitors by getting access to the secret information, they're going to have to take the risk of it being exposed. And once it's exposed, they may have to disgorge some of their profits and make them available in the form of fines for what they've done. That doesn't bother me at all. So I'm perfectly supportive of that, and it may be true that. But he also made reference to interagency rivalries. Is that somehow one or another of the military services that had access to some of this technology would get in trouble with other branches of the military? Yeah, I don't. I mean, they have their tensions all the time, anyhow. I don't really get involved in that much. I mean, everybody knows the enmity between the Marine Corps and the Navy, for example. Say nothing about the Marine Corps and the Army, but those things in all the military services toward the Air Force. I mean, all of that stuff goes on all the time, but this is only one more part of it.
Also, another question I would like to ask someone asked, could you ask what are the chances that aliens, if real, are interested in human beyond what we do to the planet? For example, nuclear weapons. The whole point of disclosure opens up Pandora boxes that could have many millions of people looking for aliens. If disclosure takes place, if that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that what really that I think that's the question is, what are all the implications here? If we acknowledge that UFOs are real and there's a real extraterrestrial civilization, aren't there all kinds of repercussions about that? The answer to that is yes. What our job at the New Paradigm Institute is to try to make those as positive as possible. What all the implications are of getting access to additional technologies that can help us solve global climate change. It can help clean up pollution, can help keep our oceans clean, can help provide cures to certain diseases and stuff that people have. There are all kinds of potential positive repercussions of this. There are some negative repercussions of this. For example, which is a mixed bag, but if in fact they have a completely as yet undiscovered energy source that is going to replace all of the oil and petroleum as a source of energy, that all of the machinery that runs off oil or kerosene or anything is going to be obsolete. That's the way it is. I mean, that's always true of any kind of inventions. Now, these may be dramatically more advanced, and therefore it may render what do you call it? Useless, I guess, comparatively useless. A lot of other antiquated machinery, but that's the way technology is. So that I do believe that there needs to be an agency of our United States government and a planetary group that is authorized to try to figure out how to soft land all of this information. How can we feather this information in so that the institutions can have time to adjust, and try to minimize the adverse impact that the integration of this new information and technology and spiritual information has, but you have to be careful of that because people use that as an excuse for concealing the information. and they always keep saying, "Oh, you can't take the truth," but we can take the truth and we can adjust to the truth. And so we advocate, a major release of this information and have it done as rapidly as possible.
I think also question is psychedelic consciousness is the easiest way to understand the science of non-human intelligence. If there a veil to be burst is within the 5 meters around everyone. If the world is ever gone, to be really sustain non-corrupt life with no lies to provide safe environment for aliens.
Those are two different questions there. I think the psychedelic consciousness is the easiest way to understand the science of the energy. Uh, is there a veil to be pierced in which within 5 meters around ever? These are interesting questions. The fact of the matter is a very major element of this particular subject, the UFOs and the extraterrestrial beings, relates very directly to consciousness. In the level of consciousness of our human family, the comparative level of consciousness that these ET beings may have if they've had, several billion more years of evolution than we, to the extent to which we're assuming that we as a human species have evolved teleologically in a positive, progressive way from earlier levels of consciousness of cavemen and, Neanderthal people, say nothing of Australopithecus. It's clear that we're in Teilhard de Chardin, writes about this. The Jesuit priest, who is a paleontologist, writes at great length about the evolution of consciousness of our human beings. And he goes so far as to suggest that Christ is a precursor to the kind of level of consciousness that our human species is going to evolve to, and that's why he was ordered to stop writing. Ratzinger, before he was Pope Benedict the 16th, he was the Karl Ratzinger, who was the head of the doctrine of the faith of the Catholic Church, banned Teilhard from writing publicly about this. But there's going to have to be disclosure on the part of the Catholic Church and the Jewish tradition as well, revealing more and more about the secrets. There are secret levels of knowledge that are known in the Christian Church by the Catholics and by a lot of the monasteries that are very much aware of capabilities that our human family has that have been suppressed, and that have been concealed. And they've actually been demonized, by the Catholic Church, telepathic abilities, precognition. So even though they attribute these qualities to saints, when they actually encounter them in the real world, they demonize them and consider them part of a cult or some kind of a satanic element. None of that's true. None of that's true. So that there's going to have to be an awful lot of revelation and disclosure on the part of religious institutions as well as government institutions that have to be done here. But it does very much relate to the issue of consciousness and the entire psychedelic revolution that has taken place during the baby boomer generation has played a major role in people being open to there being dimensions of reality that are really there all the time that you're just not aware of because functioning from the comparatively low level of consciousness that a given human being is, they genuinely don't perceive other dimensions of reality that are around them all the time. And it's just like a person who lives their life in a city and doesn't look up and see the stars. They're operating at a completely different level of consciousness. They're not taking into account the actual scope and scale of reality within which they exist. And so that therefore the kind of decisions they make are much more short term, narrowly self-interested, selfish kind of decisions they're making rather than a larger scale perspective from which to make those decisions. And that's relevant to the psychedelic consciousness issue that a whole generation encountered with the baby boomers. Okay, so there is a veil to be pierced. I don't know what you're talking about within 5 meters around everyone. I assume you're talking about the aura, that there's this egg of different vibrational frequencies that are emitted by the chakra centers in the body that establish these kind of veils of energy fields around each human body. I assume that's what they're talking about, and that is related to the issue of consciousness and the chakras in the human body. But that's a profoundly complex issue to be dealing with here in a short set of answers. But yes, all of that is at issue in dealing with the ET beings. Now, the other one is the world is ever going to be ready to sustain a non-corrupt life with no lies to provide a safe environment for aliens. Well, this it does relate to the earlier question. The higher the levels of consciousness that are reached by we human beings, the less inclined we are to corruption and lying and duplicity and stuff. And so that, but I hope we don't have to wait for the perfection of our human species in order to have contact with the extraterrestrial beings, or else we'll be waiting around for another 1,000 years, probably less. But my sense is that we're going to be having direct, confirmed encounters with UFOs, right, I think, within the next decade.
I think it's also a question you ask, when does you think we will hear from someone who will tell us that they worked on a craft or examined body or biological spoke with non-human intelligence, not a regular person who was in contact or abducted, but working within the program and interacted with them in an official capacity?
Well, I think that as soon as the disclosure, the age of disclosure is publicly released, it's a new documentary film that I mentioned that Lou Elizondo helped basically produce along with Dan Farah. And there are 33 or 34 people with top secret classified clearances that testify in that documentary film about the reality of the UFO phenomenon and this extraterrestrial life form. And in fact, Jay, oh, I forgot his name, Jay, anyway, one of the fellows in the thing, who was the head of the OUTEP, the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program, actually states that he has I think I mentioned it earlier, he has personally seen one of the UFO craft, has actually put his hand directly on it, and he has seen the biological being that was with the craft. So that's already been done. It's just awaiting public release now. It was shown one time at the Houston Film Festival earlier this year, and it's scheduled for release sometime in during this year. So that you're getting ready to hear someone do that, reveal that.
I think questions some people ask, what do you think about Bob Lazar?
Well, I haven't talked to Bob yet.
You will sit with Bob Lazar.
I'm in the process of trying to get a meeting to sit down. There's a mutual friend that we have that is in the process of arranging a sit down so we can get to talk to each other. But the things that the Bob Lazar has said in the past are all perfectly consistent with the more recently revealed information about the reality of Area 51, the existence of S4, the fact that there are craft, a real UFO alien craft at Area 51, actually at S4, and a lot of the details that Bob Lazar gave when he was interviewed earlier by George Knapp years ago and by Jeremy Corbell. The things that he was saying have really been borne out substantially already and continue to be borne out by the more people come forward who have direct access to that information. And so that it appears, and it is true what he says, that has been established that there's an active program, a deception program going on the part of United States military and intelligence officials to alter people's records, to try to undermine their credibility, to interfere with their educational records, et cetera, or their training records or their employment records. That the intelligence communities view people who have been attempting to expose the reality of the UFO issue as almost alien enemies. as though we're enemies of the national security state. And therefore, it's perfectly justified to deploy tactics against American citizens that they've developed to attack spies from foreign countries, you know, and to destroy their reputations, destroy their family life, alter their records, medical records, to indicate that they're mentally ill, and that they've got records of being mentally ill when they haven't. That's no such thing. There's direct proof of these kind of things having been done in the past. So, and that we know that the kind of things that Bob Lazar has said were directed against him are completely consistent with what the record shows that they have done to other people.
Okay, another question. Ask him about the spiritual abilities. So some monks are known to have. I think he mentioned about that in a previous podcast, and ask him what he knows about the gateway tapes and what our shadow people are. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, there are three questions there. Now, the spiritual abilities of some monks, for example, what I was saying is that it's clear that not only Catholic monks, but also Buddhist monks and Hindu monks and other human religious traditions who they concentrate on meditation, and fasting, in abstinence from overstimulating their bodies, etc., have developed extraordinary capabilities. They refer to them as the talents. The Bible refers to them as the talents. That they have the ability to heal people by laying their hands on them. They have a number of the monks have been shown to levitate. They actually levitate, rise right up off the ground during meditation. It's kind of an anti-gravity reality. That there are other stories of bilocation, that they are able to actually, through an exercise of will, sit down at one place and project themselves to another place. There's a famous story they tell about Sai Baba, that Sai Baba was known for generating this kind of dust out of his hand, out of the air. He was able to kind of manifest material out of the air. And somebody confronted him and said, "Yeah, well, that's one thing to be able to generate some kind of powder or something, but how about something more complicated?" And Sai Baba said, "Like what?" He said, "Like, how about like a Swiss watch?" And Sai Baba reached up and removed his hand and then handed him a Swiss watch. Uh, and everybody was kind of flabbergasted by it. And the guy that he gave the watch to brought the watch, found numbers on the back of it, serial numbers and all that, and went to the watch shop in Switzerland where the watch came from, and went and visited the shop and came in and said, "Look, here's this watch that says that it comes from your store. Do you remember selling this watch to anybody?" And he said, "Oh, yes." And he says, "Here, there's a particular date and time when this person, a guy in these saffron robes and long hair and beard, came walking into the store and purchased this with some little gold little ingots that he gave us for this." And it turns out it was at the exact same moment that Sai Baba had handed him the watch back months ago. And so that there are stories like that. There, for example, there are Indian fakers, they call them, big monks like that you can dig a 10-foot hole deep, and bury them in the hole and fill the earth in completely and go away and leave them there for a week and come back and dig them all up, and they get up and walk away. So there are capabilities that our human species has. It takes extraordinary discipline, lots of time and energy focused on developing the talents, but that they're there. And if you give us a few billion more years of evolution, as Christ said, that you will do things even greater than I. You know, and that Teilhard de Chardin was suggesting, implying at least, that Christ was a mutation of what our human species is going to evolve toward, if we don't destroy ourselves with thermonuclear weapons or massive global climate change. You know, that this is part of what is so engaging about the UFO issue, it raises so many of these logical questions that people ask that people perceive as being directly related to it because it involves consciousness so much. And really, what that does, it involves the future evolution of our human family, even to the point where some people believe that the ETs are us from the future, that we've actually ventured out onto other planets, and that we've evolved into these beings, and that they have conquered time travel, and that they're traveling back here to this time and place, trying to warn us against nuclear weapons, so that we don't engage in a massive thermonuclear destruction of our species, which may at one point in the future have forced them to flee from the planet. But that I'm not saying that that's true, and I don't say that's true. That's not one of the things that our institute has affirmed at all. What I'm saying is that these issues are all involved with the issue of the extraterrestrial beings and what our relationship is to them. Now, the gateway tapes. Now, I know that there's a gateway program. The gateway program is a program whereby this legacy group that is hidden somewhere deep within the bowels of the intelligence community and the Defense Department uh, have been engaged in attempting to recruit young children uh, first from the military bases and from families of intelligence communities and Defense Department people and families there abroad in the American schools and stuff, trying to find young kids that are from, in a sense, government families uh, and bring them to special training centers and train their abilities in psychic capacity, psychokinesis, you know, precognition, telepathy, other the kind of array of psychic capabilities, because they're trying to get them to fly the craft, to fly the original UFO craft, which run telepathically. And parenthetically, when you'd ask earlier about what types of technology have they really discovered, and that one of the things, in addition to discovering that the craft are piloted telepathically that I mentioned earlier, they believe that some of these craft are actually sentient, that the craft are actually, the wiring has been replaced by stem cells, and so the stem cells actually generate dendrites that connect the functioning of the craft, and therefore it can respond directly to telepathic communication from the pilot. Uh, that's how far in advance this technology has gone. And so that this gateway program was attempting to recruit young people who displayed these psychic capabilities so that they could probe into these areas and see if they could communicate with the craft so they could actually operate the original craft rather than having to try to jury rig some of the technology for some comparatively reduced capacity from the reproduction vehicles. So that's what I know about the Gateway program. It's called the Gifted and Special Children or something. It's called. Okay. Now, asking about what's called shadow people. Well, the shadow people, you got to be careful. I don't want to go off into this stuff all about the Skinwalker Ranch and Bigfoot and all these, but they have a thing they call shadow warriors that I can address. That I do know about. In that there are special programs deep within the United States Pentagon where they are training soldiers to actually engage in the deployment of psychic capabilities. That there are, you've heard of many instances where there's some person, a child or something who's been lost or something, and they bring in a psychic to go looking for them, and they find where the child is, and then they rescue the child. Or there's the famous incidents of the woman who located a downed Russian plane on the African continent somewhere. They brought her in, and she exercised her psychic search capabilities over the entire continent of Africa and located the plane right to within a couple miles. In that there are famous instances where a psychic came in and rescued the son of the major newspaper in Rome who'd been kidnapped by the Red Brigade. And a psychic woman came in and located exactly where he was, and they went and rescued him. There are these capabilities. So there's this capability. There are soldiers, for example, that in Afghanistan, in Iraq, they would all of a sudden they bring in a couple of these shadow warriors, they called them, and they would bring them into their headquarters, and they'd have a room where they would lay them down on a cot, and then they would start using psychic abilities to try to locate where certain terrorist cells were, and then they would deploy a SWAT team to go and kill them. So I think that's it's again, when a pickpocket meets a saint, right? And so that they were trying to utilize these kind of esoteric psychic capabilities to actually deploy them as weapons. But there is a whole step above that, and that is we call the shadow warriors, uh, where they assert. Now we aren't able to confirm this yet, but that there are people who have developed the capability of uh, of what would be viewed as bilocation, like we referred to before, that with the monk that did it, but that they have a capacity to be able to project themselves, astro travel, that they can astro travel to engage in a type of remote viewing that is a lot more than just sitting in a chair and being able to visualize what's at a distant location. They kind of are actually capable of going there in some kind of an energy form, that they can rest on a little bed and leave their body and go to a distant place and surveil a place like in person, to the point where they can actually be seen by anybody at that site if they're not careful. But that's the shadow warriors. But again, people say, "Oh, you shouldn't be talking about this," because this is highly classified. I don't endorse the utilization of any of this information for purposes of attempting to assert our superiority militarily over anybody else on the planet. I do not think that that is a moral and ethical use of this information that we're gaining about the human capacity. It's very different. I know that people disagree with me. I know that people that are dedicated to the assertion of US military superiority over everyone, using the rationale that if we don't have superiority over them, they'll have superiority over us, and they'll come and invade us across the polar ice caps or something, and rape our women and steal our babies. I mean, that's all part of a national security state, perverted mindset. It's not to say there isn't legitimate national security concern, but people can carry it way too far, and start coming up with extreme hypotheses of the demonizing of any adversary, economic or political or cultural adversary, suddenly becomes demonic, and is going to be trying to attack us for no good reason. So I don't believe that, and I don't think we should do that. I think that we have been caught doing that in the past. We did it in Vietnam, that we clearly invaded the Middle Eastern oil fields, and it doesn't do any good to say, "Oops, I guess we were wrong. Saddam Hussein didn't have nuclear weapons. Oops." Okay, but listen, we've already invaded them, so we might as well continue doing it, and which just happens to put us in physical control of the oil fields. None of that is rationally justified. So that this shadow warrior program has to be, come to grips with. And I think, again, treaties need to be established. If we're going to bring ourselves together as a human species on our planet Earth, in order to be able to engage in a constructive and mutually advantageous relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization, we need to get our act together here, with each other. We've got to stop doing this to each other. We've got to stop demonizing and alienating people here on our own planet, racially, religiously, culturally, and nationalistically. The nation state is a device that was designed back in 1625 by the royal families of Europe, you know, and to try to impose this nation-state system on the Middle East, by the Churchill Commission back in 1922, dividing up the entire territory into boxes, and then picking one of the tribal families to make them the king of that whole area, and then provide massive military support to that family in exchange for a share of actually a controlling share of the oil in that territory, is a sinful undertaking. It's a sinful undertaking. If you believe there's any such thing as sinful, that is it. And that we've got to stop doing that. That I don't believe that Russia's being accused of it, but the reality is we all know the kind of mutual mistakes that were made between Russia and the United States and the NATO countries with regard to pushing the NATO countries along the border of the Western Russia. That was a terrible mistake and terribly and duplicitous conduct in violation, in fact, of an agreement that was struck, between Gorbachev, and James Baker and George Bush Sr. And that was in total violation of the agreement that was made, that if Gorbachev would agree to release all of those Soviet socialist republics and dissolve the USSR, that the United States would agree not to try to recruit any of those Eastern European countries into NATO. And they went right ahead and did it, after making the agreement. So that all of us need to understand that there are enough mistakes and bad judgments to go around for everybody in the human family. But until we come to grips with the mistakes that we've made in the past, we're never going to be able to solve these problems. And we've got to do that if we're going to be able to act in a coordinated and unified way as a species to engage in establishing a set of protocols and treaty arrangements with the extraterrestrial civilization, so that we can merit respect, in the eyes of the extraterrestrials. That we have to earn that. We can't just demand it, and we certainly can't coerce it militarily against them. That's a fool's errand, but there are a lot of people that are perfectly willing to embark on that errand, and they need to be stopped.
I think there's two personal question, and we will end the podcast. The first one, I am curious to ask you personally: do you believe there's a God for the universe? When you speak about the ETs and maybe coming from other places outside the planet of Earth, do you believe that there is a God there? Do you believe that religions make sense at all after all these years? What's your conviction about all of that?
I would, well, you give some hints. I was at the United States Jesuit headquarters as their general counsel in the social ministry office when I first started working on this professionally. That the Jesuits are renowned for having an extraordinarily sophisticated understanding of theology. In fact, most of the full-scale theologians in the Catholic Church are Jesuits. And I was studying these issues. That's where I got recruited out of the Harvard Divinity School. After already finishing Harvard Law School and Harvard College, I was at the Divinity School studying these issues. And I believe that, to be direct about it, I believe that right now, with the James Webb Telescope that's up, we are probing right now to try to find the extreme exterior boundaries of our material universe. We're trying to see how rapidly it's expanding. We're trying to get out to the edges of it to see how wide the universe is, what the circumference of our material universe is. This made up of the sum total of mass and energy, both dark energy and regular energy and matter, which indicates that there's a major question that has to be asked: is what's outside of this? If we have a finite universe that has boundaries like this in it, and there's a particular age that's 13.78 billion years old, what's outside of that? And that I think that it's a perfectly cogent understanding that there is an infinite, that is a non-finite, infinite and eternal sea of completely undifferentiated consciousness that abides eternally, and that this field of intelligence actually, in consciousness, actually, consciousness, not intelligence, because the Latin root of intelligence is intellect, and that's intellectus, which is the ability to distinguish the difference between. And in the original state, there was no difference between, because there was just an infinite, entirely undifferentiated consciousness. And what happened is it generated an initial discontinuity in the infinite field of unconditional consciousness. And that original discontinuity then generated a second one through a system almost like mitosis of cell development. And then those generated more and more until the sum total of all of the inchoate quantum fields that make up the entire universe existed, but it was all in a tiny ball. It was a tiny point that where every single one of the ultimately irreducible energies of matter in the entire universe were in direct physical contact with every other one. This is just a matter of physical theory, okay? And at that point, the polarity that bonded them all together reversed, so that every single inchoate quantum field in the entire material universe repelled every other one. That was the Big Bang. Okay, and that after the first several microseconds of that explosion, the polarity re-reversed and they were attracted to each other, but the impetus that had been imposed upon them by the initial Big Bang kept pushing them out and away from each other, so that every single element in the entire universe is disintegrating. And we know that. Every single element has its own atomic half-life, so that half of all of the matter in that element disintegrates into its lower constituent parts, and that they're all moving out and away from each other. So the universe is disassembling and expanding all at the same time. We now know that, and the question is when every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe is separate and apart from every other one, is it going to continue to expand out into no thingness, nothingness? That's one of the theories. That's one of the cosmological theories. This is the theory of the first paradigm worldview, of the octave of 8 worldviews. That's the authoritarian, disintegrating theory of the universe. And there's other theories that when we reach that particular point, the impetus that was imposed upon every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the universe has expired from the Big Bang. They're still attracted to each other. Every single unit of matter in the entire universe is attracted to every other one. The degree of attraction is just inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. That's one of those things that you had to know in high school physics, right? And so the question then is, when the impetus blowing them out away from each other is expired from the Big Bang, does the degree of attraction, is it adequate for them to start coming back toward each other? And so they start reassembling. They start reassembling into quarks and muons and leptons and electrons and neutrons and protons and elements and mixtures and compounds and stars and galaxies, and so that it oscillates like that, and they continue to contract together until they all come back together again, till every one of them is in direct contact with every other one, and then the polarity reverses again. This is the second paradigm cosmology of an oscillating cosmos that oscillates like this from absolute energy to absolute mass, and it does this eternally now from the initiation of the first discontinuity. And now but what that really is telling you is that all matter, mass or energy, is in fact consciousness. It's condensed consciousness from the infinite and eternal sea of theretofore completely undifferentiated consciousness. And so therefore, human beings, the theory is that I believe it's true, is that human beings have a capacity in a state of rest, in a state of meditation, to ascend to a place of unconditioned consciousness, so that they can not only directly and immediately experientially experience the unitive phenomenon that bonds every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe into one unified harmonic whole, so that we can discern reality at a distance. both in physical space and in time. But we also have a seventh faculty. That's the sixth sense. But there's a seventh sense that we have, which is the theological sense, which is able to actually reach out and unify with the infinite and eternal sea of undifferentiated consciousness, which actually puts us in the state of God consciousness. And from that state of consciousness, you can still remain alive and you can move forward in the world from that state of consciousness. That's a perfectly evolved, enlightened being. And that is exactly what is at the root of every single one of the religious traditions, is this experience of a unistic state of being. And that you can make judgments from that point where you're not selfish, you're not greedy, you're not avaricious, you're not driven by passion and lust and greed. That you're a compassionate, loving, kind soul, and I believe that that's true, and I believe that we needn't be afraid of the ETs who have more advanced knowledge about all of this, even though some of our religions, virtually all of our religions, are still at a comparatively primitive state, and so that they're going to be very resistant to this because it's going to tend to dissolve away institutional authority. It's going to, dissolve away their power over people. It'll dissolve away people's constantly giving them money, and so that they're going to have to adjust to this, and really come to realize, much to their own surprise, it turns out that ultimately what they've been saying all this time is true. Only they didn't have adequate faith.
Thank you for that. The last question is, I want to ask you, what's your biggest regrets in life? Biggest regrets and your fear?
I don't have fear. I don't have fear, and I don't have any regrets. That I've discovered that every objective that I've sought to achieve, those that I was unable to achieve, turns out to be offering me an opportunity to do something different, which has turned out even better than the one that I would have done. For example, I was going to go to the United States Air Force Academy, directly out of high school and become an astronaut. But I would have spent my time out running around building space platforms and stuff like that, like a glorified mechanic, instead of getting to do what I'm doing now, which is actually hoping to play some significant role or not insignificant role in facilitating the development of a set of protocols and treaties and agreements where we can live peacefully with each other and productively and cooperatively with the extraterrestrial civilization. It's a much higher calling than just being an astronaut.
Interesting. That you don't have any fears or regrets. I think it's kind of a peaceful life that you have.
No, I don't. I don't have any. I just not. It's not. It's no great credit that I take for that. I just. I'm just. I think 2 minutes short of being a triple Aries. Astrologically. And so I just don't. I just don't experience it.
Do you have any final words like saying for people listening to?
Yeah, no, I would be really clear. I want you to go to newparadigminstitute.org and get for free any of the information that we've got, the open source information to everybody about everything that we have learned and what we base it upon, what we base our beliefs upon, etc. And I want you to sign up also to be part of Citizens for Disclosure. I want you to, just sign up and let us know your not only your email address, so we can know what congressional district you're in, so we can craft information specifically for you and your people in your congressional district. So you know not only who your congressperson is and of course your senators, but also your local elected representatives, to know where the local newspapers are, who you contact or write a letter to the editor, where the local cable television stations are that you can go and be on talking about the stuff that you find out about UFOs. Citizens for Disclosure. And there's a place to sign up for them. There's a link you can sign up for and become a member. And we have volunteers. We have 1,200 volunteers already, about lawyers and doctors and physicists and other people that have signed up to ask to work with the New Paradigm Institute to be able to participate in this process, you know, and also have your own podcast, just like this. I mean, see how this is? I mean, this is way cool, and you get to talk to thousands of people at a time, about this, and have people come on who specialize in learning about particular parts of this information and sharing it with you. So there's all kinds of opportunities you have here. You don't want to let this opportunity pass by. Okay, we're leaving the session in 55 seconds. So that's it. Sign up and become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure, and become a member of the New Paradigm Institute, and sign up to be a member of the Citizens for Disclosure. That's it.
Thank you, Danny. It was really fantastic talking to you, and I appreciate your time being here. Thank you so much.
Well, terrific. No, I appreciate your work that you're doing on this. Everybody should take a lesson from you. That just get right down, do it, and do
Thank
it.
you so much. Thank you.